Hi, my name is Suzanne LYE, and my talk today is titled From Homer to Caesar, Creating Leaders Through the Classics Classroom. A major goal of many colleges is to train leaders, yet besides mission statements and speeches by administrators at orientation or commencement, there are few directed opportunities in the traditional classroom for students to practice or exercise skills and qualities that constitute leadership. With some minor adjustments to class setup and assignments, however, classics courses offer tremendous potential for building leadership skills in students. In this talk, I would like to discuss strategies and assignments I use to create opportunities for my students to develop and practice leadership skills. The course in which I use these were large enrollment classical mythology and civilization classes and a smaller beginning Latin class. In this presentation, I will first talk about the specific skills that constitute successful leaders. I then discuss in detail specific types of in-class presentations, game-based instruction, and group projects that focus on developing leadership skills. Then finally, I reflect on the success of these efforts and address some of the feedback I've received from other instructors and students. Part 1, the foundations of leadership. In much of the business literature on leaders and leadership, certain key qualities stand out, including abilities related to communication, team building, conflict resolution, strategic planning, goal creation, and decision-making. When looking at ancient literature, these qualities stand out in moments when leaders or heroes contemplate different courses of action. I will leave it to other presentations to give specific examples of leadership from ancient literature. For this presentation, I would like to focus on the actual activities I used in class to foster these skills through a combination of in-class presentations, games, and group projects. In every class I teach, students are required to do in-class presentations and group projects. The former allows individuals to develop expertise on a topic, and the latter generates situations to practice the other skills. To support these assignments during actual class time, I employ game-based learning along with traditional lectures so that students develop comfort working in groups of varying sizes and interacting with each other as both teachers and learners. A key tenet for all my classes is to show up and be prepared, because all attendees will take on multiple roles throughout the class time. Part 2, developing experts through in-class presentations. In recent pedagogy, much has been made of the idea of flipping the classroom. What this usually means is that lectures are online and class time is used to consult with instructors and do what would usually be assigned as homework. Taking this idea of making the classroom into a workshop or a laboratory, I decided to flip the classroom in a different way by making students active contributors and leaders in the classroom. I'm a believer in lecture-style instruction, but instead of being responsible for all the lecturing myself, I break my course into segments where students give lectures to each other and get a feel for what it's like to be the person in charge, leading the class through problems and examples. The main way I do this is through in-class presentations. For the in-class presentation in my recent myth classes, each student had to deliver a 5-minute presentation to the whole class on a subject related to classical myths or mythic reception in the modern world. Students chose from a variety of techniques. Most did PowerPoint or Prezi presentations, but a good number of them did performances or creative demonstrations. For example, a music student composed a jazz piece inspired by the myths of Poseidon, while another student showed a YouTube video of herself telling the story of Oedipus in American Sign Language. They then answered questions from the class about their presentations and how they related them to the myths we had read in class. In the latter case, the discussion focused on the modes and effects of different types of storytelling, as the class compared oral, literary, and visual storytelling techniques. In the case of the musical presentation, much of the discussion focused on the song culture of the Greeks. The goal of these projects was to give each student a taste of being the instructor by talking to an audience about something they cared about in relation to the course themes and readings. In turn, these individual presentations offered an opportunity for the class to be active, empathetic listeners by changing the dynamics between presenter and student. There's a different feel to the room when a peer presents, and students are often more willing to raise their hands to ask questions. These individual presentations were by far the most popular of every class, and students would often follow up with comments or share other resources related to the presentations on our class discussion boards. Similarly, in my Latin 1 class, I assigned topics from each chapter on grammar and syntax for students to teach to the class. The goal of this was to convert a passive learning experience into an active one, since learning a topic for the purposes of teaching it requires a deeper level of understanding than simply reading and studying for a test. These individual presentations, therefore, made students into experts on their given topics, and they were able to help their classmates throughout the course. For example, the students who presented individually on first, second, and third declension adjectives gave a joint review session before the final exam. Additionally, we filmed these mini lectures and uploaded them to the course website so they could act as an online grammar reference. If students needed to brush up on a given topic, then they could just refer to those videos. Through weekly presentations, students developed their own presentation styles and learned how to translate information from the text to the audience in a compelling way. In both types of classes, individual presentations gave students both confidence and a sense of ownership over the material and their learning experience. Part 3, Game-Based Learning and the Interactive Classroom. Because students were in charge of individual presentations and lectures, my role as an instructor necessarily changed. In addition to individual coaching and practice with students in advance of their lectures, I developed various types of classroom activities and games with my course assistants to apply the information they learned from their readings and presentations. These included Myth Jeopardy, Latin Bingo, Morphology Board Wars, Around the World Elimination, Word Scrabble, Read Dating, and mock trials of famous literary characters. The main goal of these games was to push students beyond simple memorization to deeper understanding. Most of these games involve students working in teams during class time to figure out problems. Each class had their favorite games, but one that was universally liked in my myth classes were the mock trials of various characters, such as Dido versus Aeneas and Jason versus Medea. We also did head-to-head hero wars to determine who was the better hero or leader, comparing figures such as Achilles to Julius Caesar and Odysseus to Heracles, always using our textual sources to back up the arguments for each side. The goal of all of these activities was to add a sense of playfulness to learning and keep everyone a little off balance. Students became very passionate advocating for their side, and discussions often spilled over into the hallway after class. From the perspective of leadership training, all these activities gave a sense of camaraderie to the class and also offered a variety of ways for individuals to display their different talents to each other. This became crucial for the final group project, which is the main avenue for practicing leadership skills in the classroom. Part 4, the big group project as a leadership training course. Group projects are often the bane of students' existence, yet they are the assignment closest to representing the reality of the modern workplace. In almost every work setting, whether in academia or the business world, people need to work in teams, communicate with a variety of people, meet to discuss projects and assignments, produce something tangible, and present their findings and products to others. To simulate this experience, I've developed a group project for my myth classes that involves multiple tasks culminating in a final presentation and project. The overall assignment is to write a mythology based on the myths and themes we have covered in class within a certain category. Each group has 5 people, with each person responsible for writing a certain type of myth that contributes to a larger, cohesive mythology. Categories include major gods, minor gods, natural world, and the underworld. The students must agree on an overall storyline related to their category, then divide the individual myths among themselves. These individual myths include an origin story, a story describing the relationship between characters, an idea or just so story, a coming-of-age story, and an adventure quest. They are submitted one at a time, weekly or biweekly, and I try to give feedback on each before the next myth is due so that the group can incorporate my comments into their future submissions. Along with each myth, a group mate must give a critical analysis of their teammate's creative myth in light of the myths we have read in the course. This myth analysis is similar to traditional papers assigned in such classes, but because it must be submitted in tandem with an original myth, students must communicate with each other and work to make sure they submit their assignments on time. By the end of the project, each person will not only submit an original myth, but also a critical analysis of their teammate's myth. Each is given an individual grade for their submissions. After all the myths are submitted, the group then has to compile their stories into a single volume and give a final presentation or pitch for their mythology to the class to encourage others to read their myth cycle. This final presentation is given a single group grade, so there's incentive for the group to work together right to the end. While this group project may sound pretty simple, it involves many levels of communication, negotiation, production, and adherence to multiple deadlines. The first thing the groups learn is to establish modes and norms for ongoing communication, whether over email or a group chat application on their smartphones. One student hosted a weekly meeting over pizza at his apartment to touch base with his group. Others only interacted over group chat, but had each member check in weekly by a certain time to make sure everything was running smoothly. The primary myth writer each week had to take a leadership role to solicit feedback or supporting materials, such as art, from his or her group mates. Thus, each student got a taste for being a leader of the group for their week, and also for being a supportive teammate the rest of the time. Additionally, since all team members were invested in the outcome of the project, they had to negotiate with each other to meet deadlines and work out issues quickly. Often that meant that some students did more work up front on storyboarding the project, and others spent more time on producing the final presentation or project. As in real life, what mattered for their grade was the final product, and it sometimes meant that team members had to take on extra work when someone dropped the ball, although this rarely happened. To ensure this, peer assessment was one of the contributing factors to their overall project grade, so the students had further incentive for being responsive to teammates and completing assignments on time. In the end, every group was able to produce a final project on time, although the experience varied for different individuals. As the instructor, I occasionally mediated disputes or gave advice to individuals or groups to help negotiate difficulties that arose, such as a person not responding to group communications or one group member being too controlling. Even in the groups that did not get along well, they found a way to work together. Most individuals reported that they found the group project experience to be valuable because they learned about themselves and discovered their own capacities to be creative and act professionally in difficult situations. More often than not, the group members developed lasting friendships and acted as a natural support structure within the class, often studying together or volunteering to work with each other during class activities. Part 5. Reflecting on the lessons of leadership. After all the presentations and group projects were completed, an important component of creating a leadership mindset in class was to spend time reflecting on the experiences of the group project, games, and in-class presentations. As an individual assignment, students had to write about their experiences as presenters, lead writers, and teammates. After reading through these, I presented the feedback and comments to the class on an ongoing basis. Then we had open discussions about both the challenges and rewards of the different assignments. Because of the camaraderie redeveloped during the in-class activities and games, students felt comfortable sharing their personal experiences working on individual assignments and with their groups. We also were able to create a running list of best practices and best qualities in leaders, really realizing that many styles could lead to successful results. Most students found good communication skills to be the single most valuable trait in good leaders, and discussed how they try to improve in that particular area over the course of the assignment. As a final step, we looked at particular characters and situations in our readings to assess whether the ancient examples of leadership fit what we discovered through their group project experiences. For example, students described Agamemnon and Odysseus as selfish leaders. One student pointed out that Odysseus shouldn't even be considered a leader at all, since he lost all his men. And what is a leader if there is no one to lead? Other students compared their group's work style to those of the Argonauts in Apollonius of Rhodes' Argonautica, in that each team member acted as a specialist supported by others. Finally, other groups found Julius Caesar to be an appealing model due to his organizational skills and straightforward communication style, with the caveat that he let his own personal ambitions outstrip his loyalty to the common good. To conclude, by using some of the techniques and strategies I've described, we can make the ancient material feel alive and relevant to students by giving them the chance to practice skills that will strengthen their resumes and push them outside of their classroom comfort zones. By pairing content from ancient materials with techniques from modern business training courses, exercise boot camps, and improvisational acting, classics courses can create the leaders of tomorrow. Thank you.